everybody. My name is Tenley Holliquist. I'm the Assistant Director in the Alumni Engagement Office on campus, virtual right now. And so I wanted to welcome you to the Alumni Career Connections talk. Also, I want to give a big thank you to Kelly and Tanya for kind of co-sponsoring this one for the UNIV class. So welcome all of you. And then those who aren't in that class, welcome. You probably either got an email or someone sent a listserv message to you. So thank you for joining. Just to give you all a heads up of what Alumni Career Connections is, we bring alumni back to campus, or right now we're bringing alumni to Zoom. And we want them to share their stories with you. So Johanna will give a quick 15-ish minute overview of how she got to where she is now, some fun facts about herself, and then really open the floor to questions. So feel free to ask questions that you have. This is probably my favorite event that we do because we're not talking at you. We want you to be a part of the conversation. So, and then just the whole overall program is put on by the Alumni Office and Fleischman. So I will turn it over to Johanna to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My date for doing this was actually March 16th. So that didn't happen. I'm glad that in the last minute, we decided not to come up, and then, well, here we are. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I think I'm going to speak less than 15 minutes just to give you an overview of me and how I got to being me today, and then really through that canvas of my life allow you to ask whatever questions you have. And then Tenley's going to let me know when it's like 5 to 10 minutes left. And I have a list of things that I want to make sure that I say, but they will probably come out through answers to questions. So if I don't get to them, you'll get a speed fire round of some thoughts. So I wanted to say a little bit about my time at Binghamton. So I graduated in 2013 and I was a sociology major. I loved being a sociology major. I'm still in touch with 2 faculty members. And I did a sociology honors thesis, which I definitely recommend anyone in your major who has an opportunity to do an honors thesis to do. It was a really interesting qualitative research experience, and you get to pick whatever topic you want. And anyway, so I just want to give a little plug in for honors thesis stuff. And I lived in Dickinson. I was president of Dickinson. I loved Dickinson. I lived in Old Dickinson, so in Raypuse 112 for 2 years. And then I moved to UP, which is now called something completely different, like college something. Anyway, so that's a little bit about my time at Binghamton. When I left Binghamton, so I graduated, let's say May, in July, I left. Hi, Sophie, my college roommate, also so a journalist. So if anybody has questions about journalist stuff and putting on the spot, you're welcome to answer them. So then after I graduated from college, I traveled for 9 months and I did LGBTQ work abroad during those travels. So in South Africa, I did work research on same-sex interpartner abuse and violence in the Western Cape. I was in Cape Town, and then doing all sorts of traveling. And then I also worked for Australian marriage equality in Sydney, Australia, working on marriage equality there. So then I got back to New York and I did a lot of organizing, LGBTQ organizing work. You're sensing a theme here. I don't even know if I would say that I came out in Binghamton, but I certainly tried to. But I came out to some people, but it was a challenge. And I would be happy to regale you with experiences of that. But I came back. I was doing a lot of LGBTQ organizing back in New York. I'm from New York. I'm from Queens, and so I was doing a lot of organizing here, and I was doing a lot of criminal justice, specifically organizing LGBTQ criminal justice, mostly federal. and also really community organizing in the Jewish queer community in New York, and started to get involved in what's now my synagogue, which is the queer synagogue here that I currently serve on the board of. So that's a bit about that. And then I went off to, that was 3 years that I was, 1 year that I was traveling, 2 years that I was organizing, I guess, here and in DC. I mean, I was living here, but I was doing a lot of federal stuff. And then I went to law school. So that accounts for 3 years. And I'd be happy to talk about law school, still very involved in LGBTQ stuff, but really through my internships over the summer. So I interned at Brooklyn Legal Services in their LGBT HIV advocacy unit, and also Lambda Legal Defense Education and Defense Fund, whatever, the Lambda Legal, the queer lawyers. And so those were my experiences over the summer. But truthfully, during law school, I absolutely loved law school. I went to Fordham. I can't say enough wonderful things about it. I loved the learning of it. I loved the reading. And I didn't do a lot of queer specific things in law school just because that's been my bread and butter, truthfully, outside. And so I wanted to learn like tax and all of these different things that I didn't get to learn through my work. And then I came back. I had worked for the Vaid Group before I went to law school. And so then I came back to work for the Vaid Group, not foreseeing a pandemic, but truthfully so grateful to have chosen this job over other jobs, because I'm so lucky that I know a lot of the people that I work with. I do a lot of federal anti-poverty work. So I co-lead the National LGBTQ Anti-Poverty Action Network with someone, Tyrone Hanley from NCLR, which is the National Center for Lesbian Rights. We're about 120 organizations across the country doing work at the intersection of LGBTQ people and anti-poverty. And then I'm also working on the National LGBTQ plus Women's Community Survey. I don't know if you're sensing a theme with super long names, but we don't know how to name things with shorter words. Before, I was working on the LGBT HIV Federal Criminal Justice Policy Advocacy Group. That was the longest one. But this one, they're still long names. So I'm working on that. That's hopefully going to be launched next year, and it's going to be a really large, comprehensive survey of LGBTQ women, which has not been done before. We're working with someone named Jamie Grant, who had done the National Transgender Discrimination Survey, which if you haven't seen that, definitely go look that up. That's a huge database of trans data, and really without that and without the US Trans Survey, which followed it, there really wouldn't be trans data. And without data, it's very hard to advocate for change when you can't turn and say 5 out of 7, you can't list that data. So that's what we're doing for LGBTQ plus women. We have a very, very long definition, and it's an incredibly inclusive definition for that. I'm trying to think. I think that I covered everything. Oh yeah, something else that I was working on when I was doing the criminal justice work was working to form this network called the Donors of Color Network that now is a freestanding thing, which is really a network of high net worth donors of color. So many donor networks are just basically white. I mean, like 98% white, and like the only time someone of color, comes is like to present. It's really stark and intense. And so that was really the impetus behind that work. So I think that that's a bit of my canvas. I know that you have a million questions, so I will sit back and bring it on. Wait, Sophie, do you want to introduce yourself in case anyone has any questions about you?
I can, but I would like this to be about you. But hi, everyone. I'm actually in Binghamton gear today. I don't know if you can see my shirt.
Friendly.
Because our team was like, wear your college gear. And this happens to be one of the only shirts I still have, because they were all made into a blanket. But anyway, I am a journalist at the Associated Press, and I cover like a 10-state region in the Northeast, from Maine to Ohio. And I previously worked at the New York Post as a reporter, and at Time Magazine and Fortune and Money as an editor there. So if any of you are considering journalism in this absolutely crazy time or have any questions about that, I'm happy to ask, but please focus on Johanna.
Thank you, Sophie. And we live together in Dickinson and in UP. So are people gonna just speak on their own, or are they gonna put, oh, okay. Are people gonna put them in the chat or speak by themselves?
Yeah, so if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, that is how I highly suggest doing so. Anybody?
Okay, so I was reading about, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, is it the Vaid Group?
Vaid, yeah. It's
Vaid Group.
My boss.
So is the Vaid Group something that does like international work, or is it solely focused on the United States?
Oh, we do some international work. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. So the Vaid Group is like, I don't know. No, I'm being recorded. It is, it's a group of people like doing different things. So it's really very project based, I would say. And I've exclusively been on the nonprofit side of it. I have not personally done international work, but my colleague, sometimes my computer decides to open up mail in the middle of Zoom all the time. My colleague, Carla Sutherland, is South African, and she does a lot of work that is international and does a lot of international trainings. I did one this morning in the UK. So yes, but I am not the person to respond.
I had more of a general question about your process. So what inspired you, like I read the bio on the website, and it said that your parents are German Jewish immigrants. So what inspired you to go with your career path currently? Like,
yeah, my grandparents, but yeah, I would say there is no like, it's very easy looking backwards to create a story that is really compelling and makes sense. But I think that the truthful answer is that as you go along your way, or at least it's been my experience, I feel grounded in who I am and in my family's story and in sort of my path. So I definitely had an immigrant experience coming here, fleeing the Nazis, and that is something that I take with me. When I was in law school, my first year, I went down to the border to Dilley, Texas, and did work there, providing legal, well, I wasn't a lawyer yet, but whatever, basically providing, legal representation under someone else's license, whatever you're supposed to officially say, to people at the border. And so the immigrant experience is something that's been extremely intertwined with me. I also grew up and am currently living in Queens, an incredibly diverse borough. And so the experiences of so many of the people that I grew up with were immigrant experiences. So that's one thing that really flows through me. My experience coming out in Binghamton was hell. And that was a really, what would you say, like a really formative experience, and really taught me a lot about people and about relationships in community and in sort of group dynamics. And I definitely left Binghamton being like, no one should ever go through what I went through. And I actually did not come back to Binghamton for many years. I think Sophie, maybe that was both of our first times back. So Sophie came to speak at one of these things 2 years ago or so. And And that was both of our first times back. So I definitely, sort of stayed away from the trauma of it all. So that was definitely a huge experience. I also have done a lot of international work, as I said before, and traveled. And so the experiences that I had through that as well informed it. I also will say, this is maybe not a direct, I've gone on pretty long from your question, but something that I did after I came home from my trip was I wrote down all of these things that I was interested in and what were things that I loved from the things that I did. Like I was president of Dickinson. I loved that. I loved the community organizing. We were like fighting for laundry and like we had those old buildings and we had like literally one washer and one dryer, I think, on our side of the thing, or maybe two for all those people. Anyway, so we were like fighting for these things. And also Dickinson, I mean, it's a very different experience now. It was like the most diverse living community, also partially because of the cost. Like Mountain View was the most expensive, and then we had a lot of international students who lived in Champlain, and what was the other one? Who knows? Whitney. Anyway, so there was a lot that I loved about that job and about that experience. So I'm going to stop there. I don't even know where the question was, but I think I answered it. Did I, George?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, great.
Hi, I wanted to ask how your research differed from here in New York to when you went to South Africa and Australia.
Yeah. So Australia is the easier one to answer. It's much more like here in many ways, but they have very different sort of connections to nonprofits somehow. Like we have a more of a nonprofit infrastructure, if that makes sense, a nonprofit industrial complex, one might call it. But we have a real, like you can have a career in the nonprofit world here. And in Australia, it's a little bit different, and giving is a little bit different. So when you're talking about research, when you're talking about like how people get involved in movements, which is really where I've been, it's a very different world. I don't know if that's answering the question, but the infrastructure is a little bit different, and yet the content is very similar. Whereas in South Africa, I was doing a lot on interpartner abuse and violence in the Western Cape, and that is so different because while we definitely have our fair share of abuse and violence, there's no question. We have, as we know from recent days and talking, quite a robust police force, which South Africa really doesn't have in many ways. And so many of the experiences, like so often you'll hear women here talk about, telling, not wanting to go to the police, to not get this person in trouble, or to tell the police, but then they didn't believe them, or there's so much more interaction with law enforcement, honestly, here. And whereas there, the interaction with law enforcement is also so often very jolted. Like there was one person who we had interviewed who had just been stabbed, and so there was a police person around, and so they went to the police person and said, my girlfriend stabbed me, and the response was like, why didn't you just stab her back? Like that's not the kind of experience that is necessarily had here. There are many other issues that I could go on all day about, but there's definitely, I think, a lot more violence that we saw that was more, a lot more hate crimes. We dealt with hate crimes as well that were just sort of state sanctioned in a way that There is definitely that here, and the United States is such a broad, it's hard to paint it with such a broad brush, but it's very in your face. At least that was my experience.
Johanna, can I just ask a quick follow-up question to that before the next student goes? Can you talk a little bit about, it sounds like your experience in your honors thesis doing the qualitative studies set you up for the kinds of research that you had an opportunity to do. Can you just talk a little bit about the connection?
Definitely. I don't even think that I really noticed that in many years until you just said that. Yeah, no, absolutely true. So I had reached out to this group called the Triangle Project, which is an LGBTI group in Cape Town. And I had reached out to them before I got there. And luckily enough, where I was living was like maybe like a 10-15 minute walk away from this nonprofit, which was like complete coincidence. And I had reached out to them and probably, yeah, I'm sure sent my resume and maybe even a writing sample ahead of time, which is, by the way, something that I definitely recommend doing, like cold emailing people. I have an intern that I'm working with right now, like high school student, cold emailed me, like 100% recommend. I do not have time to like put things out there like I mean, I will if I have to, but I would prefer if someone lands in my lap, and this person did. So it's much easier to do that, and I just feel like people don't do that enough. And I think that there are a lot of small people. I can talk about small, like honestly, as a separate issue. I don't want to get derailed. You can remind me about that, but there are a lot of smaller people doing a hell of a lot of great work. And they don't have the same red tape that a lot of the larger organizations that have a lot of stuff going on. And red tape can be exasperating, which is one of the reasons why I have the job that I have right now. And I'm very happy that I have less red tape. But your question was about the honors thesis. So the honors thesis definitely gave me a physical thesis that I could give as a writing sample. My honors thesis was about the social implications of questioning your sexual identity within the context of the American dream. And so I analyzed, I haven't talked about this in ages. I analyzed basically the process of questioning one's sexual identity through, it was work, home, and not pursuit of happiness, but like something about, like how we're seeking happiness. Family, work, and happiness. Anyway, so I had that to my advisor was Benita Roth, and it was under Gladys Jimenez Munoz. And so we had, so I had that in tow, and then I had reached out to them, the group, the Triangle Project in South Africa, ahead of time by email. They didn't get my email. So I showed up to the place and was like, hey, I'm going to be here 6 months. Like, can I help? They were like, you know what? We just fired all these people because we don't have the money, and we just don't have the capacity to take you on. I was like, I'm free. Please, I'll do anything, and I'm free. And they were like, no, we just don't. So I just stood there and I just listed off everything that I'd ever done. And I told him about my research. I was like, I'll do, and he was like, oh, research. So then he sent me to the research director who was there at the time, who was like, oh yeah. And she had like her PhD in psychology, which was sort of random. And she was doing all of this work on intrapartner abuse and violence. And so that's how I got into it. And so I interned there. A vote for persistence. But I wouldn't have gotten that without that under my belt, for sure. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I actually have to leave soon because I have another meeting. But first, I'd like to say thank you for your time. You seem like you've done a whole lot of work in a little bit of time, and that's awesome. So my question has to do with your work with anti-poverty, and if you could talk more about that in relation to policy action based on your research and your experience.
On the local level or on a federal level?
Federal.
So what a time. So it's a very odd time on the federal level to be doing anti-poverty work. Our network holds space for both local and federal advocates. A lot of what we're doing right now is really hopeful work, putting out policy priorities for both presidential candidates to take a look at and think about, and personally hoping for a new administration that is friendly to our plight. A lot of our work is also within the movement itself. So a lot of my work when I was doing criminal justice policy work, although now it's very much because of our work, truthfully, and because of the vision of my boss, who is a fucking superstar. Sorry. Criminal justice is on the agenda of queer groups, and they have specific positions for people doing that work. It did not exist before, period. And we're doing very similar stuff around poverty now in a very similar way, and trying to push anti-poverty work on funders, getting funders to fund anti-poverty work in the queer space, getting organizations to take anti-poverty seriously and to fund positions within their organizations. So it's sort of a multi-tiered project of, you want to get your federal policy priorities out there. You certainly want, I want to say, the administration, whatever administration that is, to take your work seriously and to care about poor people. I thought that the COVID pandemic would put everyone into high gear. I was so wrong. I mean, so wrong. So funders continue to not to think that they are funding, and yet certainly not funding explicitly economic justice and queer events, queer programs. There used to be a group called Queers for Economic Justice, which disbanded, I don't know, a few years ago. And there's really not been an organization to take its place. So I don't know if that answered your question, but certainly we're working on the federal level. We don't have a friendly administration right now, so that affects that work. We're doing inside movement work of how do we get national and local organizations to be moving in the direction of putting economic justice on their agendas, queer organizations, and how do we put queer issues onto economic justice movement organizations. So that both of those things are happening, and certainly also on the local level. And then how do we do sort of local advocacy and helping people through the COVID pandemic, food pantries, all of that. So, I mean, it's a huge umbrella, and we're doing what we can.
Thank you.
I had a question. So I noticed that one of the core values mentioned on the Vaid Group website is that those experiencing inequality and injustice must be integral to developing solutions. And I was wondering if you can think of any specific incidences where this value has made your group more successful than other organizations that don't necessarily have this value and might work more like a charity or something like that.
Yeah, in my opinion, I mean, you cannot effectively work on anything without anybody who's experienced the thing that you're trying to deal with. To me, that's common sense. So, I mean, we talk about it now. I mean, all of a sudden, we're having this racial awakening where people all of a sudden didn't know that there was racism in the world. And then they woke up overnight and so thrilled for them. But many of us have been doing this work for a very long time. And we talk about it certainly in the racial justice context of you need to have people on your boards that reflect society. You can't just have one person. I know something that, again, being recorded, but who knows, whatever. When I got to law school, I went to all law schools. Most law schools, 99% of law schools are extremely white. And there are. So I got there, and mine was particularly white. So I got there and I just looked around and like, I mean, I just had never been in such a white environment. And I just like felt like if I went into the dictionary and I was like generic white man, and then I just took that picture out and then I just like pasted it like all over the place, like that's what I would get. And I just don't feel like in any, I mean, I was lucky. My section was, somehow I got into this section that was like full of all these public interest people, and like we definitely, it doesn't really matter. But so we had like a really diverse section of a super non-diverse school. So I will say that, but you don't learn the same. You don't hear about different experiences. Like you want your life to be rich. You want your life to be full of people who've experienced different things. And I mean, in answer to your specific question, which is about like making sure that when you're doing the work, that you're doing the work with people who have experienced whatever that is. So if it's economic insecurity, you can't, in my opinion, like you swoop in and be like, oh, well, now I'm going to save all of you. No worries, guys. Like I'm coming in, I've got the money, like money will fix it all. And that's that. It's important in terms of building the pipeline of leadership. It's important in terms of actually knowing what you need to be focusing on, to really dive into solutions that will actually be effective. I think so often groups that don't have, I don't love the word directly impacted, but don't have people who have been through what you're trying to deal with, you just have huge blind spots. You just can't effectively do the work, in my opinion.
I had a question. How did you decide that you wanted to go to law school and like pursue that path? I know you said that you really like your sociology major, but how did you decide that's how you wanted to like apply it?
Yeah, so I think I really felt a pull to graduate school. I think everyone is going to answer this question differently and with varying degrees of honesty. So I'm just going to go with an honest approach. I think I definitely felt that I needed to go to grad school. I was doing a lot of, at that point when I really made my decision, I was doing a lot of federal criminal justice, specifically LGBTQ work. And I was by far the youngest person, I mean, for miles. Like, it would be me, we would have these meetings. We had a friendly administration at the time. It was the Obama administration. We would have these like meetings at the Department of Justice or the White House. And I would literally be, it would be me. And then the next youngest person would be like maybe 35. So I was maybe 23. And then the next person was 35. And then like the next person was like 55 or 60. So I was in these rooms where like almost everyone was a lawyer, and I could see, and none of them were practicing, and I could see the benefit of understanding. We were creating like all of these documents, like it's not even worth going into the details, but we were creating all of these documents, and it was so clear in the drafting of these documents that it was so helpful to understand the law, to understand the systems, to really have a strong grasp on if you're trying to change the law, like what is the law? So, and I felt pulled anyway. So, I mean, I think it was always percolating. I definitely didn't feel ready once I graduated from law school, for sure. Law school. Once I graduated from college, I was not ready to go straight to grad school. Sophie did. But I just felt like I needed to get out of there. I mean, I loved Binghamton. I loved Binghamton my first 2 years. And then sort of after that, things got interesting. And I needed a minute to collect myself and not be somewhere where I felt like I had to look over my shoulder or whatever. So that's sort of why I went. I will say so happy that I did. And I see the effect in my work. I mean, I'm 28. Yeah, I am for another month. I realistically I'm 29. I don't want to say I did all of this stuff in that amount of time, but I'm almost 29. I definitely look young. I sound young, and it's hard to be taken seriously sometimes. And I find those issues along gender lines, along age, often, whether it's through my board service, through my work, it's a challenge. And having the extra degree, I think, helps a little bit. Certainly it helps in my work. Like, I definitely feel that I understand so many things more, and I'm able to be more effective, certainly in my anti-poverty work, in my writing, and so many things, even just in terms of understanding what's going on in the world. But I was going to say something else and it flew right out of my mind. Law school. No clue. If it comes back, what was your question? Why did I go to law school? No idea. That's okay.
Johanna, can I ask a follow-up to that too? So yeah. You're not a practicing attorney, right? Right? You didn't sit for the bar.
Oh, I did.
You did sit for the bar. Okay, you passed the bar, but you're not a practicing attorney. All right. Can you talk a little bit about your decision there? That I think it would be interesting, particularly for a first-year freshman, to know that law school is an opportunity even for people who don't intend to be practicing attorneys.
Yeah, 100%. So like one of my favorite, I'll go deeper into that in a second, but like one of my favorite classes of law school was I took federal income tax, which if you go to law school, I cannot stress enough, like take it. I don't know if there's undergrad tax classes. I don't know. Loved it. One of the greatest vehicles for creating economic justice in this world is through our tax system. Our tax system defines what our values are and what we hold up. Like, what do we value? We value home ownership. We don't value renting. We value all sorts of things, and they are all in the tax code. And there are so many loopholes, and there are so many interesting little things, and a lot of stuff that's super messed up. But it's all in the tax code. And so we need people who are thinking really, really deeply about how our systems work and how can we find creative solutions to make our world a better place and be on the side of people who have less. I saw this, I don't even know where I saw it in some Gothamist article. This was like through the pandemic. I'm going to butcher it completely, but it was saying, like, you know, for you to ask this question of, if you didn't know who you were going to be, how would you create a society? It was asking specifically about New York, but it applies to anyone. And if you didn't know if you would be able to see or not, if you didn't know what color your skin would be, if you didn't know what family you were born into, what ability you would have to study or not to study, you know, if you didn't know any of those things, like, how would you create a society? And I think that we need people, whether they frame it in that way or not, we need people asking those questions. And I think the more people who we have asking those questions, who have a full grasp of the systems in which we work, it helps. The other thing that I will say, I mean, I'm like super for education, like really into it. But I see education as a pathway to success, certainly. But I'm really fascinated by the lines that are drawn by education in this society. 30% of our population 20% has college degree, and if you count masters, PhD, JD, all those Ds, all of them, it's 30%. So that means 70% of our population does not have a college degree or more, which really fascinates me, because to me, that means that we need to be shifting how we look at life and how we create and grow our society, because education really can't be the only path out, and it can't be like I just feel like we look at it as like this beacon of hope, and so many people don't finish. And is education really the be all and end all? Can I sit here and tell you that I am who I am today, or that like I would know so much less if I had just sat in my living room and read the books? Because so much of law school is reading, and reading for hours, like all day, 8 hours a day, just reading. Like I did that myself, you know, so and then I paid a lot of money to them to like give me a piece of paper and to teach me. And I definitely took advantage. Like, I do not want to say I took advantage. I went to every single class. I read every single page that was assigned to me in law school. Like, I did not play. But at the same time, is that the only answer? I don't even remember what the question was. Law school, not practicing. So I guess my answer is there are so many ways that you can use a law degree. I don't have an intention to practice. I took the bar and wanted to make sure that I passed it because I want to be able to represent people, certainly on a pro bono basis. And before the pandemic started, I mean, my plan was to sort of always have like immigration clients, you know, pro bono on my plate, but life's a little bit different now. You know, so I think that it's a wonderful thing to have, but it is certainly not a necessary thing to be able to make this world a better place.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry I can't have my audio, my video on, but I just wanted to ask, you mentioned your sociology degree, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about any ways that you thought it affect the way you looked at your work. So, you know, like how you would have used it to approach the work that you were doing and the research that you did.
Can you just repeat the first part of your question?
Just like how you used your degree to approach the work that you did.
Yeah, I mean, I have it. So obviously it affects everything that I do. It affects my like interest in tax. It affects how I see things. I'm a very logical person. And certainly like a type A logical person is like who ends up in law school. So there I was. So, I mean, I think that the reading, I'm a very thorough person. I like to really understand the dynamics of a situation before speaking, before taking action. And so much of our work specifically that we've done at the Vaid Group is we start with research. So we research, for example, for the Donors of Color Network, we researched high net worth donors. What were they giving to? Why were they giving? You know, there were so many things that we did on the research end, and then using that research to take action. So we did the same thing around, you know, anti-poverty. We did these 8 convenings in 8 cities across the United States who had high populations of poor people and high populations of LGBTQ people. And we did all of these interviews and then came up with this report. And then following that, we had a convening and then we started a network. So we're very like research and then action and then sort of creating coalitions around the work that that we do. And all of that work, I think, is so layered in the law and in really understanding, you know, how systems work. My boss also is a lawyer, non-practicing, although she spent a little bit of time practicing. She worked at the ACLU Prisons Project, was her first job. But yeah, I think that answers your question.
We have time for 2 more questions.
if not, I'll get in there and I'll say some of my side stuff. I'll go. You can if you want to, yeah, if you want to ask another question, feel free to just say you have a question in the chat. But here are some things that I just want to make sure that that I say. I think that it's more true in law school. I think it's less true in undergrad, but I felt like I feel like life tries to let you know through institutions that there is one path, and I just don't feel like that can be further from the truth. Every single one of us is so individual, and we all have something specific to us and to our story that's important to give to this world. And my hope is that we make that contribution good. We make both good and bad contributions, all of us, to the world, whether we're doing good work, but then we have our seltzer in our, whatever, in our can. Like, we're all contributing in good and bad ways every single day. And my hope is that the contributions that you guys make through being grounded in your own stories are good ones. So that's one thing that I'd like to say. Number two, there's many pieces of advice that I give to people through just like career type advice that feels odd to be giving in the midst of a pandemic, because so many things are so different and we have to learn how to adjust our sails in so many ways. We all have family obligations and potentially work obligations on top of school, and then of course school obligations, and life looks really different. And I think really understanding where your anchor is, if that anchor is Binghamton, if that anchor is still in your home bedroom or whatever that is, and really curating what this, let's say, 1 year, 2 year pandemic experience looks like for you. Maybe that includes volunteering on top of your classes. You would be doing so much more on campus if you could. I don't know what's available on campus or what you can create, but the university experience is such a meaningful one and can really create a lot of space for you to build things yourself, which is something that I've always wanted to do. I think that when you build it yourself, you have so much more control over what you're building and so much more space for creativity. One of the things that I did through my synagogue was I founded this group for young professionals, which is called Alumni, which in Hebrew means it's up to us. And it was like half social programming and half social justice programming. And I did this discussion series called Architects of the LGBTQ Movement. And we had Gilbert Baker, who created the rainbow flag, come and speak about art as activism. And all of Edie Windsor and Roberta Kaplan, who were the Windsor decision of 15, maybe 13. I don't know, whatever. The point is, you can create those things yourself. You can use what you have around you to create. And I think I've done that all along my way of just creating my own, path. Like, no one does anything on their own, like you take what is around you, you take the support that you're given from your family, from your friends, from your chosen family, whatever that is, and you build up whatever you can. And it's a challenge to do that in the midst of a pandemic. I think that it's the hardest, to be honest, for people who are younger and are trying to grow those networks in the midst of this. So I would just ask yourself, like, where are you anchored? And, see if around that anchor you can build from there. I always say, when the pandemic is like not happening, to go to events around issues that you care about, to reach out to those speakers, to, whatever, like, you want to find other people who are your people, who are interested in the same things that you are. So that might be, I don't know, architecture. So then you might want to go to events about that. Maybe this is not the group for the architecture, but you know what I mean? So, everyone's got their thing, and you want to find your people. So in person, I think that that's easier to find your people there, but still there are so many opportunities like this, to find your people that way. I also talk about a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. So often, I'll speak specifically for women, we often have mentors. So we often have people who are interested in mentoring us. They care about us. They care about our well-being, about our future. And so often, I'm speaking obviously in very general terms and within a binary that I don't believe exists. But very often men have sponsors. So they don't necessarily know them, but they're like, yeah, I'll give you a job. Or like, my buddy will give you a job. And that difference between what you want is someone who's a mentor, and you also need somebody who's a sponsor, who's going to give you a job, you know, who's going to actually put their money on the line or put their reputation on the line for you. I was lucky enough to meet my boss through the discussion series that I created. And so I had her come speak. I said I would do anything for her for free. And she hired me, and she was at Columbia Law School at the time, and she was leaving to start her own practice, which is now Vaid Group. And so like that was a wonderful, you know, lucky situation that also was grounded in, I had created this discussion series, you know, through that anyway. So that's one thing. And then two things about money. One is, you know, if you don't spend $1 million, you don't have to make $1 million. And that's something that my mom overheard in an airport one day, and I just feel is really important, you know, information. And I think that there are so many things that we feel around money, every single one of us, coming from our own financial experiences, from our own life experiences. And I think so often we say our own financial status or our own financial state of being in relation to other people's. But I think it's so important to have that conversation, whether it's with yourself, whether you're still in a position where you're having that conversation with your parents, to really think about what it is that you want and what it is that you can accomplish and how you can accomplish those things. And during the pandemic might be a great opportunity to really think about what those opportunities are or what those challenges are and how you can overcome them, because I believe in the power of us also. My last thing that I want to say is about unpaid internships. So I very often, so in law school, I had unpaid internships. I was funded through my school, but they did not pay me. And I say this to anyone that I work with. I generally do not believe in unpaid internships, I very much believe in them from the unpaid person's point of view, but from the person dealing with an unpaid intern, I really try to never be in a position where we have completely no funding for that position. And I've taken on like an unpaid intern like to wait and like have had to wait to get funding and then paid them at the end. But from a working perspective, like I believe that you should be paid for your work. So that's number one that I just want to say. But from the unpaid intern perspective, I just always want people to remember that you are unpaid and they are not paying you. It is a wonderful opportunity that you have to show your skills and to be of help to them. And I will say that I have had like bad experiences with people who interned at major organizations who like did not complete work for me. And I now know their names and I know them, and like that's not great. Like you definitely do not want to leave a net negative response, but you are unpaid. And so to just remember that your time is yours and that you are choosing to give that time to them. And I hope that you are in positions where you are doing work that's meaningful to you, whether that's filling out a spreadsheet, but then it leads to something else or, you know, whatever it is, but to just remember the opportunity that you have to succeed or to blow it off or fail or, you know, whatever it is. And that you're representing you're representing your, you know, school, whatever it is, but that you really do sort of come first, and that you should be respected in that role, and doing what you want to do. Okay, so that's my list of things.
We have time for one more question if someone has one. If not, I have one, Johanna. So is there a student organization that you were part of on campus that kind of helped you get to where you wanted to be? Or did you start a student organization on campus? Was there any extracurriculars that you were a part of?
For sure. So I think truthfully, although I can't believe I'm saying this, I think three maybe organizations on campus had the most effect on my being here. I think one, I was President Dickinson, loved Dickinson. We had a leadership thing that Sophie, that you also were in. I just loved it. I loved the advocacy that I did, the organizing that I did. I worked a lot with auxiliary services around things. There were all sorts of stuff going on with that. We had these meetings. It was great. I loved it. So that was one thing, and that really, I think, what my appetite for organizing. Number two, I was involved in Hillel. I really, I think, appreciated that each week, although I think Hillel might be a little bit more orthodox than I am right now, nowadays than it was when I was there. But just having a space every week to, no matter how the week went, whether it was a good week or a bad week, to just have Friday night services was a really special thing that I instituted in my life at Binghamton, that I then carried over into my life post graduation when I came back from my trip. And so I go to services every week. I used to go in person, but we're in a pandemic, so here we are. And then the third one, I would say, I was in a sorority. I was in Greek life, and I would say that I would not be who I am today if I was not in that sorority. It was not, in the end, a positive experience for me. And being gay in it was rough and maybe near impossible. But I don't think that had I not had that experience and that challenging experience and that sort of like brunt with challenge, I'm not sure that I would have been as passionate as I am about my work. And I'm not sure that this would be the specific route that I would have gone down.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. I hope all the students, you enjoy yourselves and learn a lot. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Johanna. So thank you again for doing this. Would you be open to sharing contact information?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how should I do that?
You can just email me. We'll provide like a survey at the end, probably tomorrow, and we'll just include it in there.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you. And Sophie, so good to see you too.
It was a pleasure. And should we just tell people to come to our homecoming event too?
Yeah, sure.
So we're doing, and now it's like so close because it was supposed to be in March, October. Now we're September, October. But we're doing an event that I can't really speak broadly about, but I'll be talking about LGBTQ poverty, and also and in COVID, and also what else am I talking about? Oh, and SCOTUS, Supreme Court cases, LGBTQ cases. But it's a whole LGBTQ homecoming event, and it's on October 13th at some time, maybe 6.
Yes, 6 o'clock. So if you're interested, I know Kelly's a part of it. If you're interested, let us know and we'll shoot you over the link to register for it.
Yeah, we'll definitely share it. So thank you, Johanna. This was so great.
I'm glad. It was a pleasure meeting all of you.
I want to thank you too. Sorry, this is Tanya, the other co-instructor for the course. And I'm Associate Director for the Multicultural Resource Center. I don't think I got to
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for introducing yourself. Okay.
All right.
All
See you
right.
again in a few weeks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.